at the same time. So if I can now sort of introduce Sam. Sam is the Vice President of the British Institute of Non-Destructive Technology. Sam is going to be talking to us about essentially NDT. Now, until we started sort of putting together this webinar, NDT wasn't something that I was quite familiar with. But now I've sort of done my research and got into it and had a couple of conversations with Sam. It's understanding just how imperative this is. So a bit about Sam then. So he's Vice President for the British Institute of Non-Destructive Testing. He's also representing Lavender, which is a globally recognised provider of NDT, such as training and examinations and consultancy. For Sam himself, he's very passionate about creating that next generation of NDT professionals, reducing that skills gap with NDT. And he's going to go through some facts and figures, and you will see just what he's trying to achieve, or them as an organisation, what they're trying to achieve. But he does really have that extensive background in anything and everything that is NDT. And again, if you're anything like me a few weeks ago thinking, well, what is NDT? You're going to have some great examples. So Sam, over to yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Martin, and thanks to you and Steve for inviting me on to this webinar to give a bit more exposure to NDT and the industry that surrounds it. And like you said, you've not heard of it until you got introduced to me, and that goes for a lot of organizations and individuals that should really know a little bit more about it, because it's a critical part of industries around the world, and making sure that the integrity of these parts are maintained and sustained over a long period of time. And without NDT, to put it bluntly, there'll just be big lumps of metal that are not worth very much until they've had that rubber stamp from NDT. So yeah, I was just going to talk about our industry and the challenges that we've faced over quite a long period of time, really, and that's around the skills gap. Because like you said, there's not that many people coming into NDT. You don't leave school asking to be an NDT inspector, whereas actually now that's what we want more than ever, because there's a massive demand for NDT inspectors in the UK, around the world, and we just can't find them. But hopefully my presentation will shed a bit more light on that and bring a bit more positivity to my intro of doom, let's say. I just called it. So yeah, just a little bit about Lavender International. So like Martin mentioned, we are a global provider of non-destructive testing, training and examination services. So what we do is we work around the world with organizations to train their members of staff in carrying out our NDT techniques. That are I'll mention in a little bit about what these techniques are. But the reason why there is this training and examination process in place is because these techniques are not something that you can just pick up and crack on with, so to speak. There is an embedded theoretical and practical element, which is quite highly regarded. So once you've gained these qualifications, then as long as you've got experience in their methods, then you're allowed to go around the world and practice NDT. As long as you hold the certification in place. So I work for Lavender International as a technical sales manager, working with clients in the UK and around the world. But I'm also vice president of the British Institute of NDT. So the British Institute governs the NDT industry within the UK, and they offer their own certification scheme. They are a professionally recognised engineering institute. So we work with like the Royal Academy of Engineers, 3Ms, and I'm a key, for example, to make sure that industries are working in accordance with our standards that we dictate. And I'll come on to it in a little bit, but the British Institute of NDT, the members within it was quite high on the age demographic scale. So when I started going to NDT, I was literally had to be dragged along to some of the meetings because I didn't want to go. It wasn't something that as a younger person, not that I'm that young now, but as a younger person, it wasn't very attractive to anyone. So when I first went to some of these meetings, working groups and committees, I really wanted to change that demographic and that attractiveness to younger people to come into NDT. So that's what my little presentation focuses on, really, is the challenges within NDT and what we did to try and mitigate these issues. So first of all, I just want to give a bit of a brief intro into what NDT is, just so everyone on the call knows a little bit more about it. So obviously NDT in essence is the testing of materials to make sure that they're safe before and during they're in service. So if you think about an aerospace turbine blade or an aeroplane turbine blade within the engine, NDT has formed a critical part in making sure that the turbine blade has got the highest integrity that it can possibly have. You won't want to be in the air and making sure that and not aware of that part has been tested and someone's checked it off that the integrity is 100%. So any little defects in that blade could cause catastrophic consequences later on down the line. And it is, even though you might not have heard of it, it's quite a big industry. Earlier on in 2020, I think the estimate was around $5.6 billion around the world in products and services. And it's continuing to grow as well as demand increases, and like organizations like Sophie's Bentley, their interest in quality assurance, and organizations like Rolls-Royce, EDF Energy, they have more and more every year an interest in safeguarding their assets and integrity of their parts. So just a couple of key NDT techniques that we use in industry to make sure that parts are safe. For example, magnetic particle testing, as you can see in the right top left-hand slide there, you can see that image there. That's what's known as MPI. We have dye penetrant testing, visual inspection, ultrasound, which you can see on the bottom left-hand corner. And anyone that's been pregnant, obviously you have an ultrasound scan to make sure that the baby's safe. Basically, that's exactly what we're doing, but on a metal component to make sure that the component inside it, there is no defects or there is no cracks propagating to the surface. Similarly, if anyone's unfortunately broken their leg or their arm, they might have had a radiograph of their injury. So we can do exactly the same, but using it to inspect the inside of a metal component. And again, another technique that's widely used is something called eddy current, which uses electromagnetic properties to make sure that parts are safe. So hopefully that might have just blown your mind completely, but it might give you a little bit more of an insight into what NDT is. And these are the types of industries that we work in on a daily basis, making sure that parts are safe, whatever industry it is in. So obviously, one of the key areas is the aerospace and aviation industry. Like I mentioned, I think there's about 35,000 parts of that plane are inspected using NDT technologies. So you won't want to be on that plane if 34,999 are inspected safely. You want that every single part to be inspected safely, making sure that there's no defects in any of them parts. Similarly, with the maritime and shipbuilding, infrastructure, oil and gas industries, power generation, nuclear, all of these organizations are using NDT every single day to make sure that their assets and components are safe and able to be used within industry as well. So some key names on there that are using NDT. Obviously, you might have heard of a lot of them, hopefully, and they use NDT every single day. So I might have given you a bit more insight into the critical nature of our industry that we're working in. Just move on. So what happened in 2016, there was a report that was done on the NDT industry within the UK, and it was published by the British Institute. And it found a multitude of different issues that we were going to face in industry over the next 10, 15, 20 years. And one of the critical parts that they found was that 60% of the NDT members were over the age of 50. And as you can see on that slide there, the big red, the deep red line is the UK industry, or the British Institute industry. And the average age was around 55. Compared to the rest of Europe, we were very top heavy, meaning that if we didn't do anything as an industry, that we were going to have a critical issue in 10, 15 years time, where all of these inspectors then start to retire. And I'd rather be on the beach with a couple of drinks rather than doing NDT still. So we do see this now. Obviously, that was in 2016, and a lot of these inspectors, especially with the impact of COVID, have moved on now to maybe part-time or to totally retiring out of the industry. So what we did, and as you can see there on the right-hand side, we needed to maintain this population. At the minute, in 2016, we estimated a newly qualifying rate of around 500 certs per year. Whereas actually now, to maintain that population and the people coming out of the industry, we needed to maintain it at around 900 per year for new starters coming into the industry, to make sure that that population would be safeguarded and that sustainability of the industry would continue as well, without having to pull resources from other countries or other industries. We wanted to make sure it was all safeguarded within the UK. So what we did is we had a three-pronged approach really to safeguarding our industry. One key one was awareness. Like Martin hit the nail on the head when he'd not even heard of it. I don't know if anyone else on this call might have heard of it. I'd like to think that some might have, especially Steve Crawley, seeing as I worked with him for a couple of years. But we approached it from an early careers demographic, really, to start with. And we created our own apprenticeship scheme. So the British Institute of NDT came together, and we had industry buy-in from a lot of individuals, a lot of organisations. So some really big names, like I mentioned on the previous slides, like BAE Systems, Rolls-Royce, EDF, BP, Shell, all had a key interest in this employer group. So they came together and devised the Trailblazer Apprenticeship Group, and we created 3 NDT standards, apprenticeship standards from this group, which were slowly introduced in around 2017. And I'll come on to some key stats as to the success that we've had with our NDT apprenticeship programs. We also used to use the boot camps for NDT, really just to give individuals that might be unemployed a bit of a different scope to where their career could go. There's no academic levels of achievement that you need to get into NDT. It might all be set at an employer's requirement, but you could come off the street tomorrow and gain NDT qualifications. However, you need to gain work experience working with employers around the country to become a certified level 2. And it's not as simple as just coming off the street. There's a bit of a cost to it. But if you went on one of the boot camps, you'd gain an appreciation of NDT as well. Another area that we had an issue with was basically the BINDT having a bit of a reputation for being an older demographic. So what we did is we created an early careers branch to try and nurture younger individuals coming into the industry so that they felt like valued, and we could offer career advice and guidance so that they can go on to then maintain their status in the NDT industry, but also go on to achieve additional qualifications. So that was one key area that we focused on, was generating an awareness. So hopefully, even doing this presentation, we've done a little bit of that today. One other element, which is quite a bit of a barrier to entry, was the cost of training. Obviously, the NDT training sector, it's not cheap to put on these courses because there's a lot of consumables and industry professionals that we need to pay to make sure that they can deliver their expertise over to someone that might not have had that yet. So what we devised, obviously through the apprenticeship scheme, was access to the apprenticeship tax levy, but also access to other government funding. And that meant that younger people coming into the industry would have their qualifications paid for, obviously through their employer and the apprenticeship levy or government funding. And that would then help anyone coming into the industry quickly gain their qualifications required to maintain that population. But we also factored in, obviously, the boot camps, again, a really nice cost-effective way of helping increase that engagement with the NDT sector and getting individuals in to have that taster as to what it is like to work in NDT. We also offered an accelerated work experience program that we offer through Lavender International, and that was a bit of an issue around joining the NDT sector, is that you need to gain accelerated work experience. But how do you do that if you've got no job in the sector? Because employers want people that have already got people with qualifications. So we generated an accelerated work experience program where people can come to Lavender International and gain 50% of their required time over a much shorter period. And some of our techniques require a year's worth of work experience to become certified as an NDT inspector, which, as you can appreciate, that's a lot, and it's a lot, very time consuming and costly for an individual that wants to join. But we also have helped individuals get their certification a lot quicker through the accelerated work experience program. And then finally, the third problem that we wanted to do is to solve was the mentorship and succession planning internally within organisations. So like I mentioned, some of these big names, like even the MOD, the RAF, what they saw, they all use NDT. And what they saw is that rather than recruiting outside, they could use internal staff members to gain NDT qualifications. Obviously, they might have seen it, they might have had an appreciation of it internally, but without the qualifications, you can't do the job. It's as simple as that. So what they did and what we did as an industry was had a really big push on succession planning internally and having a bit of a mentorship program as well, so that individuals could, anyone that works in NDT is normally quite passionate about what they do. So they wanted these passionate individuals to go into their workplace and do taster days, do little workshops on what it is, just to raise that awareness again, but also take people under their wing and give them their qualifications, partly because there was such a shortage of inspectors around at the time. So obviously the bit of a current landscape, I'll need to zoom in here because my writing's too small. But 2016, obviously we had that aging workforce, and now we've managed to reduce that average age from 55 to 39 over an 8-year period, which really is a good success story for the industry. We've had over 150 NDT apprentices complete their program, with the majority doing 3 NDT techniques. So 150 times by 3 is an excellent output for the new certs that are coming to the industry. And over the next 2 years, we estimate that that'll go up to around 450 new certificates generated for industry, which doesn't meet that 900 cert renewal population, but it goes a long way to helping it via a scheme that didn't exist 8 years ago. So it's a really good way that we're looking at the industry now, and it's a lot brighter than what it was. However, there's still a massive shortage of inspectors. Not necessarily the skills gap that's a problem now, but more the sector as a whole is looking for NDT inspectors, or anyone coming into it. Like, there's a lot of jobs now around trainees and apprenticeships in NDT. So if anyone was interested, we're more than happy to try and help them find a job within NDT to maintain this population and to safeguard our industry. And I think that's it from me, Martin. So hopefully that provided a bit of an insight as to our industry and what we're doing to support the growing nature of it.
Fantastic, Sam. No, thank you very much for that. And as I say, from when I first heard of NDT, the awareness wasn't there, and I think that's given us everybody on the call today that great overview of how imperative NDT is. So if you think when you're on you're going abroad on your summer holidays, all this equipment technology has to be tried and tested. You think of the exciting opportunities as well that it may lead into. I know with the Bentley side, it was talking, that they're a network of 13 other car manufacturers, and there's international travel. I think even there's the opportunities here of sort of going out and sort of experiencing and seeing the world, because that technology and innovation is all around us, really. So thank you very much. There have been a couple of questions that come through, Sam, and I think that you sort of answered them as you were sort of going through, really. So we've got one individual asking, how do you get onto an NDT course and how long does it take to complete? I think, that there's many different options and opportunities for people to go through these programs. It's understanding maybe what their knowledge is beforehand, of whether it's, apprenticeship can be that route, or if it's that, going on doing sort of short courses and opportunities. But you did allude to, 12 months of training in some cases to become an NDT inspector, which I think is ultimately those sort of routes for some people.
Yeah.
Some about the metrology, sort of in terms of labs and things. Would this be sort of next steps after NDT processes? And again, I think this is where it gets more specialised and specific. But I have shared the Lavender website out to people. So please do sort of pick up and connect from there. And also, you'll be able to sort of search and connect with Sam on LinkedIn, no doubt, and I'm sure he'll give you the advice and support.
Any questions on NDT or how to get into it, just send me an email via that email there, or just drop me a message on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to help.
Fantastic. So you've got Sam's sort of contact details on there. Please do pick up and speak with Sam. There was also a mention about, is it best to have internal and external? I think a lot of the time it's having that awareness internally, isn't it? And potentially, if you could have that luxury of having somebody that is NDT qualified within your organisation, then you've got some of that dedication result, ensuring you've got that that constant testing and sort of challenge within the business as those practices. But I know we're sort of running over here, so I do apologise to everybody. We will just sort of jump back on with Steve if we can. But thank you very much for your time there, Sam. Very worthwhile. We'll be speaking with you again very soon, I'm sure. Thank you.